Should we get into the headliner?
Oh, I'm ready. I'm so ready. Let's do this.
So this was the genesis of this whole concept. I was looking at the Houston Astros, who, mind you, are losing again to the Yankees as we record here. I think they're about to. They did lose now. They get swept. I got one more. So one more, which would move them. If they lost again, that would move them to 12-25 on the year. They're 12-24 right now. It's crazy. We'll talk about them in a minute when it comes to World Series odds, because the odds have not moved as much as I thought they would, because, man, it's been a rough start for them. People aren't necessarily saying they're not going to make the playoffs. I think there is a chance that this Astros team could be a seller, and could Justin Verlander get moved? And if he was going to get moved, how about joining the Tigers at the end of that rebuild they started when they traded him? And maybe he can help them get into the playoffs for the first time since 2014. How is that for a trade that will make baseball better?
It absolutely would. Him going back to the place where he made his bones pitching in the World Series with the Tigers, and his now Hall of Fame manager, Jim Leland. So I think it would be fantastic. You know, one thing I didn't realize at the time, his now wife, Kate Upton, she was born in Michigan. So, I
There you
mean, this,
go.
talk about a homecoming, right? Like, I think that's fantastic. Yeah, I think, again, with the Tigers and in a city like Detroit, unless you are from the Midwest, I don't think anyone necessarily hates Detroit. So you go, hey, you know what? Those folks there, it's nice to see them back in the hunt. It's nice to see the Tigers relevant, one of those teams that's been around for a while, but have really fallen on hard times for about a decade. So I think you tie all of those things in together, and I think everyone would really root to see that happening, both for the Tigers end of the things and for the Astros having to wave the white flag and say, is this the end of the Astros? Death to the Astros? A lot of people would be happy about that part.
For sure. I think what's so crazy about this whole situation is, I don't know if Justin Verlander is becoming like a reverse rabbit's foot, but last year we saw it with the Mets, right? He comes over, he gets hurt to start the year. The team gets in a huge hole, can't come out of it, and it ends up being sellers at the deadline. Here it is, back with the Astros for a full season. Hurt to start the year. The team gets off to a horrible start. And like I said, people aren't completely giving up on the Astros, but if you're 10 games under 500 by the deadline, at a certain point, you're going to have to make that decision. And Verlander's contract makes this really complicated, because he has a club option that triggers if he gets to 140 innings pitched this year. Now, last year he exceeded that with missing a similar amount of time, so we'll see. But that club option at $35 million becomes very attractive, because the Mets are still eating half of it. So $17.5 million, you could say from an Astros perspective, all right, hang on to him. You'll have Verlander. You'll be better next year. You can roll through it. But also, let's say he ends up pulling a hammy in September and he doesn't get there. Well, now that contract is off the table. So trade him while you can for another team. They look at that if you're the Tigers and you say, well, all right, if he gets to 140 innings, we have a potential co-ace with Skubal at 17.5 million. That's not bad for us. So I think he is very attractive at this deadline. And if the Tigers are in the mix, I wouldn't count it out.
Yeah, no, I love it. You hit the nail on the head with where I was going to go next with Skubal from the left side, Verlander, the veteran, from the right. Jack Flaherty's a free agent after this year. He had a 1-year deal. So, boom, you plug him in there into the rotation with all those young guys from Reese Olson to Casey Mize. Like, that's absolutely fantastic. That's a perfect situation for, Verlander to pass the torch to those young guys. And I think, again, it's that those narratives are the things that we love about baseball. Guys going back home or going to a place where it really seems to fit, and everyone wants to see that not only happen, but happen and be really positive for the city, for the team, for the player.
For sure. And for the player in particular, he does have a no trade clause. And so I think this is a landing spot that he would look at and like, all right, I don't know how many years I got left. The Tigers, he might win another World Series, but if he just gets the Tigers into the playoffs, that will mean a lot to him. To kind of close your book on your legacy there as a guy that's going to have your jersey retired, you would assume 13 seasons there. And it kind of opens up an interesting Hall of Fame case, because right now, what would you think? 13 years in Detroit, a lot of great stats, the Triple Crown, all that, but 2 Cy Youngs and 2 World Series with the Astros. I sort of think that he's an Astro in Cooperstown right now on his plaque. Would a playoff berth, let's just say he has a great final season in Detroit and wins another Cy Young. They're like, could he tip the scales back to Detroit if he ended up over there?
I think he's a Tiger right now.
You think so?
In my estimation, also the way the Hall of Fame does it, the player no longer has the choice. Guys
Yeah.
like Wade Boggs kind of ruined that, saying, "Hey, I got the secret," which is all really alleged, although officially alleged. That he's taking $1 million to go in with a Rays cap on in Cooperstown, right? So you can't pick your own hat. Now he could go in with just the MLB, but having played with 2.5 franchises. Not that I'm calling the Mets half of a franchise,
Well, yeah,
but
it's
that was
half a
just
season. Yeah.
yeah,
We can sweep that under the rug. It didn't happen. It was
exactly. It did not happen in that way. So I think the Hall of Fame would look at him saying a bulk of his career was there. Sure, a couple more awards and the rings there with Houston is something, but Verlander was already a brand by the time that he ended up leaving Detroit. But yeah, that makes it all the more interesting. Would he allow for that no trade clause? I think he would want to go. You know why? Max Scherzer just won a ring last year. Now,
yeah.
yes, he was injured, but he got a ring. You don't think Verlander's going to say, "Hey, I want the newest ring"? Like, you got last year's model. I want this year's model.
Well, who knows? Maybe the Rangers. No, I mean the Astros would make that trade. Yeah, I mean, I wonder like what would the other fit be out there when he's dangled? I would imagine whatever the contenders are. If he saw a destination where he could go and he can have a chance at a World Series. Last year, it was just perfect for him, right? Go back to Houston, great team. This year, it's a little more murky. A couple things that have to, come into play for this to happen is, for one, the Tigers got to hang in the race to be willing to make this type of move. And two, the Astros got to fall completely out of it. But it's the most fun of all these in there, because I can just imagine seeing Verlander step on the mound again in a Tigers jersey and the type of fanfare that would get.
Now, he's from Virginia, Verlander. So, Orioles, are they going to? I don't know how
That's a good
much.
one.
I don't know if they have to empty the coffers necessarily, but
That's
hey, you want to add him right to your postseason rotation? That's fantastic. That works out perfectly. You can worry about the offseason in the offseason, worry about next year if he's going to be retained, or even even crazier scenario if the Astros are out of it and they're just looking to take the best offer. Hey, you know what? Let me go show some of these young guys on the Washington Nationals how to pitch. He goes there, less likely that he's going to win a ring there. But look, all you're trying to do is get into the postseason, and then it's an entirely new season at that point. So either of those two teams, you could have a fit in a nice story.
the last fit that I've heard some people toss it out there comes back to the Mets. They're already paying half the salary. Come on back, come back in if the Mets are in the fold. I don't see that one actually coming into play because, for one, who knows if he'd even want to come back, and two, I don't know if the Mets are really going to be emptying the coffers for anybody this year. But Justin Verlander getting traded is not something we would have expected going into the year, but we said that last year and it happened. So it's something to keep our eyes on at the deadline this year. Who else is going to go in Houston before we move on to other teams? Would they consider dealing, Kyle Tucker, who's a year away from free agency? I don't think so. But if they were trying to, that would mark kind of the end of a dynasty. We're going to have to rebuild around Jose Altuve. Let's really bolster the farm. Other than that, Alex Bregman is obviously the guy that's heading towards free agency, and that'll lead us into our next trade here. But anybody else you see on the Astros?
No, I mean, as far as getting,
It's
bringing
for
back a significant return, right? Like that,
Yeah.
there's an option on Ryan Presley. You already got Josh Hader locked up for a very long time. So, okay, maybe you can be creative in that way and let go of Ryan Presley. Rafael Montero, he still has 11.5 million coming to him next season. But after that, he's a free agent. So, it's similar conversation with the Marlins, where you're not just looking at trading the guys who are rentals for this year. Teams will pay a little bit more if they know that they're going to have the guy next year too. It gives you two bites at the apple. It's one of the reasons why the Padres paid as much as they did in the first place to get Soto, so they could have him for 3 runs at the postseason. So
Yeah.
I think any number of those guys could end up going on the trade market. Kyle Tucker, not as much. Man, he's one of the most underrated players I think
Yeah.
in the game right now. 30 home runs on the nose almost every single season. He'll be pricey, but I could see them wanting to retain Tucker and throwing a bag at him than Alex Bregman, who we're already past that point.